My name is Josh, and this is my story. I moved into the old Victorian house on Maple Street with the belief that a change of scenery would fix everything. The breakup, the constant grind at work, the ever-persistent feeling of existential dread. They were all supposed to vanish, or at least diminish here. The house had been empty for years. No one really knew why, but the locals seemed to avoid it. I had the place inspected before moving in, and it was deemed structurally sound. It's a good project home, the inspector said, failing to meet my eyes. I spent the first few days painting walls and scrubbing floors. I had just started on the basement when I discovered the little room behind a stack of old wooden panels. It was small, maybe 6 by 6 feet, and had a strange air to it, as though the walls had absorbed the years of solitude and were now exhaling their loneliness into the room. I decided to turn it into a wine cellar. It was the perfect size and, despite its eeriness, had a certain rustic charm. That's when I started hearing the footsteps. The first time, I dismissed it as the house settling. The second time, I thought maybe an animal had gotten in. But by the third time, the slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the basement were impossible to ignore. I called the police, who searched the house thoroughly but found nothing. "Probably just rats," they said before leaving. But I knew better. Rats don't wear boots. I set up cameras covering every nook and cranny, especially the basement and the tiny room that was now filled with crates of wine. Every morning, I'd eagerly review the footage, but there was nothing. Almost reluctantly, I started doubting myself. Was I hearing things? Was the stress finally getting to me? I decided to spend the night in the basement, armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat. I settled down on a camping chair, my eyes glued to the door of the wine cellar. Hours passed. I was on the verge of giving up and chalking it up to paranoia when I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silence of the night. My heart pounded as I gripped the bat tighter. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then stopped right outside the wine cellar. I held my breath, my eyes straining in the darkness. The door creaked open slowly, and a figure stepped inside. The next few seconds were a blur. I lunged at the intruder, bat swinging. There was a sickening thud, a groan, and then silence. I flipped on the lights and gasped. Lying on the floor was an old man, disheveled and unkempt. He looked almost relieved, as though grateful that the years of hide and seek were finally over. I called the police, who arrived within minutes. As they handcuffed him, one of the officers looked at me gravely. "You have no idea how lucky you are. This guy's Leonard Sims. Escaped from Ashwood Mental Hospital 5 years ago. He was convicted of multiple murders, all in homes he was squatting. Victims never knew he was there until it was too late." As they led him away, Leonard looked back at me and grinned. "Nice wine cellar," he said, his eyes meeting mine with a horrific clarity. "It's just like the one in my old place, where they never found me." It took weeks to clear out the room in the basement. Hidden behind the wine crates was a small bed, a makeshift toilet, and a slack of journals detailing Leonard's adventures. But what chilled me to the core were the photographs, dozens of them, all taken from hidden spots around the house. There I was, sleeping, eating, painting the walls. In some, I was looking right at where the camera must have been. My eyes filled with an unwitting dread. I moved out the next day, but I never felt alone again. Leonard was caught, but the realization that he had lived in my home, my sanctuary, left me permanently scarred. And as I set up cameras in my new apartment, I couldn't shake off the feeling that somewhere out there was another Leonard, watching and waiting in the shadows of another unsuspecting victim's life. So here I am, always watching, always listening for footsteps that may or may not come, forever questioning the sanctity of my own home, and even my own sanity. But you must be wondering why I'm telling you this. It's not for sympathy or even understanding. I just want you to know, just like I do, never, ever assume you're alone. Because you might not be.